He honora he krore ki te atua, I maungaronga ki te whenua, whakaria pai kena tangata katoa. I started with a karakia in greeting the Honourable Committee as a promise to my Maori mentor that I would always start with a Maori karakia. And also, from a tone point of view, I in my submission, have said that I was keen to look beyond this bull that's going to die and what happens next. And so the question should never have been about treaty principles, but more importantly, how do we as a nation honor and respect the treaty in a 21st century democracy as a nation of 5.8 million people? And some of the objectives and goals of the principles bill are laudable, to promote a national conversation, to build consensus about the treaty, to promote a greater legitimacy in social harmony and cohesion. But the outcomes have been abysmal. And so, for example, with the objective of greater social cohesion, if we take stock today, we've seen the largest march on Parliament. We have seen so much hate and division. The relationship between Maori and the Crown is worse today than when I was Race Relations Conciliator in 2001, all because of this bill. And not only have we bedeviled the relationship with tangata whenua, but we have also failed dismally in our undertakings that the key government gave in signing the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People in 2010. And now Joseph earlier from the Pacific Lawyers have already spoken about Article 3, where we've denigrated the recognition of Maori rights. But there's also the FBI seal. It has to be free, prior, and informed consent. We've ignored our commitment to the treaty, and we've ignored the participation in decision-making of Maori. So if we want to lecture other people on human rights, then we shouldn't be hypocritical by reneging on our own responsibilities. And so if we wish to renege, then go and say, no, we won't honor the declaration that we signed. But that's enough of the treaty principles bill, because I just quickly want to get to, we need to work towards this vision of a dream for 2040. So 200 years since the signing, who we want to be and the place of the treaty in a 21st century democracy. We don't have to be clones of each other. We don't have to assimilate, but we must be harmonized in our diversity. And we have to sing off the same hymn sheet. And so it's time that we started developing that hymn sheet. So a few suggestions. And the first one is that we must have this robust but respectful national treaty conversation. 30 years ago, I drove up to Pakaitore. And for the first time in my life, I had a cup of tea in a tent with Dame Tariana Turia, with Sir Archie Tairua, and the Ken Mayor. And I'll tell you the story to make the point that I'm not a tea drinker. But in order to listen, I drank the tea. And so if we want to have this national conversation, it cannot be one where we arrogantly lecture to other people. It has to be one of listening. It has to be one of probing and asking inquiring questions, not telling. And it has to be properly resourced. It has to be Crown supported. And it must be input from the local communities. It must be input from Maori leaders to ordinary Maori. It must be input from historians and legal experts, etc. But let's properly resource a respectful national conversation. And then there's been talk about a treaty commission or an advisory body. Then we should clarify the role of the Waitangi Tribunal and this treaty commission. And maybe the treaty commission, if it's properly clarified, could drive the activities towards 2040 and could play a lead. But if we have a treaty commission, it must have teeth, it must be properly resourced, and it must be co-led by both tangata whenua and tangata treaty. And then we need to have a robust education awareness campaign in the schools, at the citizens' advice bureaus, in all levels of New Zealand society. And all you have to do is go to all the treaty settlements and read the many speeches of apology as to why the government paid the treaty settlement. Particularly go and read the speeches of Chris Finlayson, where he talks about not just confiscation, but he talks about death and destruction. And so we should do that education so that all of New Zealand can understand that. We should also maybe focus on some community-based partnerships so that we can start doing some stuff together and build a relationship together. And then we should explore maybe how in practice this Article 1 and Article 2 work. And we have contorted ourselves in wanting to reconcile the English version with the Reo Maori version. I don't think we're ever going to come to a conclusion. So let's just work out how can they coexist. And I suggest you go and talk to Bishop Kito and the Salvation Army Governance Board as to how come they got to an Article 2 runanga and they are actually growing their Maori mission. And then just lastly, I think we should have commemorative initiatives, which we start on now, and get the school children to maybe draft a declaration of shared goals and commitments, etc. And finally, if there is a referendum, imagine we had a referendum in 1840 when there was 98% Maori. who do you think would have won that referendum? So if you want to have a referendum today, you will see the tyranny of the majority. You need to have two separate referendums, one for Maori and one for the other partner. I will continue to dream of us as a small nation at the foot of the Pacific, living in harmony and singing off the same hymn sheet. It is possible if we progress with integrity, with pragmatism, and most of all, respectfully being inclusive. Kia kaha, kia maya, kia manawanu, kino taumata. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much for that, Greg. We've got time for a very quick question there from Steve Abel.
Yeah, excellent submission. Thank you very much for coming and presenting to us. What is the harm that is done by, in general, to ethnic communities, tangata whenua Māori, obviously the subject of today, but the harm that has been done, well, we're all the subject, I suppose, the harm that is done by the license given to denial of Indigenous rights in terms of how it manifests in the community towards people who are potentially the subject of racial aggression?
Oh, look, if you saw the march against the bill, there's so much division. It's going to make it so much more difficult for this small country to have harmonized diversity. And I want to remain optimistic to focus on we can reconcile. We can become a nation in harmony. And I don't want to focus on the extremes, but 80% of us in the middle want to see this nation that respects the treaty, but also lives in perfect harmony. It is possible with 5.5 million people. So I don't want to focus on the negatives.
Good. Thank you for that, Gregory. Really,
thank you.
I needed a cup of tea.
Oh, actually, yes.
You know, just on that submission, Sam, I mean, my warning to all non-European New Zealanders is if this is what they're doing to us, wait for it, because eventually they'll come for you too. So all the Hanamana Chinese, Asian whānau, all of the Indians and those from the subcontinent who support active national and New Zealand first, be very careful what you wish for. Be very careful. And all of our Pacific Island whānau that support these three parties as well, again, be very careful what you wish for, because just as the apology that was delivered, say, for example, the Dawn raids, can be given, it can be surely taken away. Greg raised a really interesting point about, well, if this does go to referendum, that 98% of the country in back in 1840 were Māori. That stands to reason the tyranny of the majority would have been that the referendum would have failed. As it was, those representing individuals, the chiefs, mainly of the north, signed to Te Reti o Waitangi, and here we are. If it was to happen again today, then I don't agree that there would be a majority for a referendum in favour of this bill. I still think that the vast majority of New Zealanders are over it.
I would be a bit questionable on that from what I've seen coming through on the comments on our YouTube channel. I would have said that probably a month ago, but the Treaty Principle Bill submissions, which are a ratings winner, as in it gets people actually, seeing the stuff there, both positive and negative, people who are for supporting the bill, people who are against it. I've had people who have emailed me saying, thank you for actually making it available. But it's interesting where you see the comments live. But I mean, also at the same time, Margie Upper is apparently a male, according to one of them, because they just think CEO, they think man. So, I mean, there is a lot of informedness. We're about to have a trial run this local body elections over Māori wards. I have my predictions of which areas are going to retain them. I have my predictions which areas are going to revert back. And
I think
that's a big sign.
I think, look, I don't think anything is certain anymore. I think you've got a group of individuals that do honestly think that they are in the majority of this question. They go blindly into the dark without a torch, thinking, "Oh no, we're going to win this bill. We're going to win this bill." Or there's some grand strategy of Seymour's to indoctrinate the rest of us into his way of thinking.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say is, A, this is not Australia. B, this is not the United States. So even though in those two environments, I mean, you have a bear pit of discontent. Here in New Zealand, it's a little bit different, and I think the right side of politics has got this part wrong. It's not our culture at all. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, look, we are literally 18 months away from a general election.
Yes.
I think the litmus test is whether or not this government can go 2 terms.
Yes.
I'm not certain of that, because and the reason I say that is because the vast majority of New Zealanders, I believe, that voted for the centre right of New Zealand politics, New Zealand First, acted the far right, because we need to call them what they are. They're a far right party.
Yes.
They're extremists. They like to call the Party Māori extremists. Well, that's a bit rich. And then you've got New Zealand First. I mean, to be frank, New Zealand First will always go where the wind blows. And that's the survivalist mentality. The vast majority of New Zealanders, coming back to my point I'm trying to make, though, is that they voted because they were worried about their cost of living. They were worried about their mortgage interest rates continuing to go up. They were worried about food prices. They were worried about the economics of the situation we find ourselves in post-COVID. They did not bank on this being the issue that would suck out so much of the attention away from the fact that they're doing it tough. And I would also argue that there is a grand majority of people in the middle classes that we used to call the working class. We now refer to them as middle class New Zealanders, who are in debt up to their eyeballs, that are living paycheck to paycheck off the back of their credit cards. And so they're worried about all that sort of stuff. They're worried about parking at a Wilson, parking or whatever in the city when they go to work. They're worried about being laid off their jobs. They're worried about all these different things. And it's a reminder of the 80s, where interest rates were well above, they were in double-digit figures. People were struggling. People were being thrown on the scrap heap. We were being told that state-owned enterprise was going to be sold. Well, welcome back to the past.
Yeah.
So, that's all in living memory for a lot of these people. And these people are not aren't the parents that went through it. Their parents went through it. We're now seeing their children, people of my age, that are going through this. I've got neighbours where I live that I know are financially struggling, and yet where I live, people would think, oh, well, that's a comfortable suburb, a middle-class New Zealand working-class suburb. Well, no, not anymore. Not when you said the price of butter at the local supermarket being nearly $10, or a block of cheese.
It's cheaper to buy vegan cheese or the vegan butter at the moment than their milk product version, as an example.
Well, that's right. And to be frank, I mean, I was watching a comment on my Facebook feed today about the school lunch program, and somebody was being a smart ass and said, oh, well, I can feed my kids for $3 a meal. Why can't you? Somebody else said, oh, well, Weet-Bix are only $4.99 a box. Yeah, but we're not sending our kids to school with Weet-Bix. It's the whole thing is just completely ridiculous. But what I'm trying to say is the Treaty Principles Bill has highlighted something significant in New Zealand, and that is not so much for the right side of politics, but the left. They need to figure out who they represent. Do you represent the working class New Zealander who has become the middle class New Zealander, or are you attempting to represent everybody else? Because you can't do both.
We're going to have to move now. I want to know, do you want to stay for the Committee of the House Crimes Fifth Amendment Bill? Because there's a bunch of fireworks from Grant McCallum, MP for Northland.
I'd love to, but this time of night I get fatigued to the point where I've just got to go and shut my eyes.
No problem. Okay, well, we'll get moving, and we'll see Laura back here in just a moment. Thank you, Matt, for joining us tonight.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to our Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok, News Guide, the Order Paper Podcast.